I love the fact that you never fully know the impact that you're having in this world. I've had people come up to me years after the fact and tell me that because they listened to the podcast, they joined the zoo world. Or a person who reached out and said, yeah, we got these checks, during like a little after the main COVID thing, these economic relief checks, whatever.
Right.
I didn't need it, so I donated the entire thing to one of the zoos that you featured.
Nice.
And it's like, I didn't know that when it was happening. I didn't know, and there are plenty of weeks where I'm sure none of that happens too. But...
Welcome to another episode of Animals, Nature, and You. Today we are welcoming Jon Rossi to the podcast. Now, he's the host of his own podcast, the Rossifari podcast. He's also a touring musician, actor, and music director who happens to visit zoos and aquariums and conservation organizations when traveling on the road. Earlier this week, I was a guest on Jon's podcast where we discussed my career as a spokesperson and ambassador for the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, getting laid off, and then where's my career going from here? And yes, of course, we talk about zoos, conservation, and animals. Today, though, it's my turn to start asking Jon about his career, how he fell into being a champion for zoos and aquariums and conservation organizations. And of course, I do have to find out exactly how did red pandas, tree kangaroos, sea turtles, and binturongs land on his list of being his favorite animals. So with that, Jon, I do appreciate you doing this collaboration with me. It's great to be on your podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on my new podcast, Animals, Nature, and You.
I'm so excited to be the you in that podcast this week. I'm so excited you're doing this, Rick. I love you. We go way back. And I also I love podcasts. I think it's a great space. So when I saw you launch this, I got really excited.
Oh, well, thanks, man. I appreciate that. And I purposely kept the intro and your bio very minimal, which is not normally how I operate, because I want the audience to experience the unpacking of how you got to where you are. So as of right now, you've got this awesome podcast. It's been going 6 years, right? Like 2020 is when it started?
Yeah. So it was a COVID project.
Okay. So you had a COVID project of a podcast, Rossifari, combination of your last name and Safari. And you've got over 600 plus episodes at the time of this recording. I just checked to make sure I had my numbers right, which is ridiculously impressive. You were kind enough to reach out and have me on your podcast when I was a spokesperson for San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance. You travel. So this podcast, if you're only watching and listening to this podcast, you travel all over to zoos. You talk to people from all over the world doing zoo, conservation work, etc. You have solo episodes where you're just like reading awesome new breakthroughs in news and conservation. And yet your day job is what?
I am a drummer. And I do lots of other things. I act and I music direct and all that stuff. But like when people ask me who I am for my entire life, I've been like, hi, I'm Jon. I'm a drummer. That's it. That's how I always saw myself.
Right. And from my side of the fence, from my world, looking out and seeing you when you initially reached out to request being on your show, I was like, wow, this guy's doing a lot for conservation, doing a lot of communications. And part of, I wanted you on my podcast because you're awesome and I love talking to you. But it also fits really well into what I try to always share with people is you don't have to be that PhD scientist, which, I've had a couple of those on the show already, and they're great and they're awesome. And they also share, too, they have other loves and other passions beyond the work they do with conservation. You're coming at it from, you started off in performance theater, drumming, music, acting. So COVID project for the podcast, I would assume, given how much you are vested in conservation and wildlife, that there was a passion or a love for that before you started this project of the podcast.
Somewhat, yes, but I'm amazed myself at how deep it's become and how quickly. So when I was growing up, I grew up in the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area. So we had Zoo America was right there, but I was about an hour, a little less than an hour away from Baltimore. And so every chance I got, I went to the National Aquarium where I fell in love with sea turtles. And I went to the Maryland Zoo at Baltimore. And once I was able to drive myself, it became a thing that was so important to me. If I was dating someone and it looked like it was serious, and I'm talking high school serious, but still.
It counts at the time.
Yeah. And I would take them to Baltimore on a day trip, like fairly early on, because if you can't handle me, when I'm sitting and staring at a sea turtle and misting up for 20 minutes, then you don't deserve me as the cool, like, top drummer guy at the school who you get to date. So I always had that. But at the same time, I'm fortunate that they were good facilities, because if it had been the Tiger King Zoo, I think I would have gone just as much. I didn't know what accreditation was. I didn't realize how much the industry as a whole is exploitative of animals, and it is a problem. And I'm just so lucky that I ended up going to good facilities. All the places close to me taught me the right things. And then when I started touring is challenging. It's a lot of fun, but it is challenging. And some of the tours, my second ever national tour was 11 months. I was gone for 11 months. And I think there were 6 total weeks where I was partially off during that time. But you're with the same people. You're on a bus. You're in hotel rooms. I watch people that I love have full on breakdowns on the bus, and just stuff that I would have never expected from them. And I'm a pretty happy-go-lucky guy, but I was not super pleased with all of that. And then there's a lot of drinking and light drug abuse, nothing crazy, but certain things that I'm not really into. And it happens a lot on tour. And so I decided I needed to not be surrounded by that as much. And so what I started doing was, instead of staying up late and drinking or just hanging out with everybody who was drunk or whatever, I would go to bed early. I'd go to bed right after our shows. And then as soon as we got into the town that we were going to next, I would have already looked up the local zoo or aquarium or both. I would often have the Uber waiting for me.
Oh, nice.
When I got to the point where I could time it out, where I would get off the bus and not even go to my room. I would walk in and grab the Uber, or walk off and grab the Uber, or maybe walk in and drop my bags. And I would go to a zoo or aquarium. And it was amazing. And I started learning about all these animals, and I'm that nerd that reads the signs. I'm that guy. I'm the one who does that. And I started talking to zookeepers, and I would only ask about the animals. I didn't want to know anything about the people at the time, but who is your red panda? What is that weird black furry thing that I found out is a binturong, which I now love, And as I would talk to these people, they would start talking about the animals, and they would share their own experiences. And I remember thinking at the time, this should be a podcast, because honestly, you listen to a lot of podcasts and audiobooks and stuff on a tour bus. And so I tried to find one, and there really wasn't one. A few zoos at the time had maybe started one, tried a few episodes. A lot of it, as you know, it's hard to keep up.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, that's cool. I wish there was one. And that's as far as it got, until COVID came, and an entire year of work disappeared in one day.
Yeah, no touring.
Yeah, no, nothing. No, nothing. And at the time, I was my wife is a veterinarian, and she was not home. She was off doing an internship, externship, whatever, and had our pets with her. And so even though she would shortly come home, because COVID shut that down too, I was in a house completely alone, with no work, no animals, no love of my life, no nothing. And my mental health wasn't the best at that point. It always had been. I was fine, and it crashed hard. And I remember thinking that I needed to do anything, anything, whatever. And I reached out to some friends, and we started doing some long distance recording projects together for fun. One of which ended up becoming the theme song of Rossifari. But I remembered the podcast, and I had all the mics and stuff upstairs. And so, yeah, I launched a podcast. I set a starting date. I set everything up, and I was like, this is happening. And it was literally just for my mental health.
Nice. And so did it start off, because I honestly, goodness, at that time of all of that going on, we were trying to figure out if we're going to keep filming the second season of the Zoo San Diego. My daughter was probably, she was in elementary school, and so it was school from home. I was working from home while also trying to figure out what we're doing production. So I don't know, your first couple seasons, were you just doing solo, or were you reaching out trying to interview people?
I got very lucky. So, as I started going around to those zoos and everything, I would take pictures. I had a camera with me, and I started the Instagram of Rossifari, and it was
Mhm.
just like a fun thing for me. I had no plans or goals, but I would tag the zoos, and sometimes keepers would find them and start following me. And so I had a small, I had probably 3,000 followers when I launched the
Mhm.
podcast, which isn't a ton, but I mean, 3,000 people is a lot of people.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
yeah, and a lot of them were keepers who had found me because I took pictures of their animals and they would comment and stuff. And so I built relationships with some of them, including Jake Belair, who is now at the National Aviary but had been at the Nashville Zoo.
Mhm.
And is just he's one of those people who connects everybody always. And he was one of the first people I reached out to, and I was like, hey, do you think your zoo would let you do a podcast if I started a podcast? And he was like, I'll ask. And they let him. And another keeper that I had become friends with, Danica Wolf, who was
Mhm.
at Zoo Atlanta at the time, same thing. She was able to vouch for me because she had gotten to know me as a person a little bit, just online. But it worked. And once I had 2 actual AZA accredited zoos on my podcast, then
Mhm.
as I started emailing, I would be like, well, I've done interviews with these 2,
Right.
and then it was easier. But the first 2 years, there was a whole lot of trickiness. There were a whole lot of PR people that were
Mhm.
like, who are you? What are
Right.
you? And I'd be writing and saying, hey, can I have an hour of this person's
Mhm.
time for the 100 people that are listening? It's like, oh. But it always worked out. There were always facilities willing to do it. And I leaned heavily. I think Nashville was like, probably did 8 interviews there fairly early on because they were
Yeah.
willing to let me.
Nice.
But no, it worked out from the start that I had good guests on.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I love the trajectory you've been on. And it's one of those things too. I think you kind of touched on it. Sometimes it can be hard to stay consistent with podcasting. Having initially done the podcast for the San Diego Zoo, knowing the statistics that it's usually there's some ridiculously large, like near million something podcast, but only a small percentage get past 3 to 10 episodes. And then beyond that, it's even a much, much smaller number that go past 2.5 to 3 years. And then after that, it's like, if you've made it to 3 years and haven't hit burnout, you can have possible success. So I love that you are at over 600 episodes, that you've been doing this for 6 years. And honestly, I have to say, it seems like in the last year, you're getting even more momentum. You're getting more involved with the conservation side of stuff, getting more involved with safe projects for different species. And I'm loving it because, again, I want to lean into the fact that part of my podcast exists because I want people to understand that conservation, getting involved, making a difference isn't a far away going to the country and stopping poachers. You can do it while you have a different job. You can be a part of the bigger picture, that it is a collective. It's all of us. So with that in mind, I want to ask you, how has it been balancing doing your podcast and getting more involved with conservation while also maintaining being a drummer and doing all the other work that you do?
Great question. So I have 2 answers for you that are going to contradict each other a little bit, but I'll explain. So the first one is balancing the time and stuff has actually been really easy. I'm
Okay.
fortunate that my actual job of playing the drums is something that I do some weeks out of the year, some
Mhm.
days out of that week, and my really, really busy days are like 4 to 5 hours of work, right? I have not had a 9 to 5 my entire adult life ever since
Mhm.
I made it as a musician. So a real heavy day for me is going to be 2 shows. The shows are going to be under 2 hours long, and then there's like the time to get into my costume or whatever I'm wearing. So that's my real heavy day, and there are a lot of days where my work day starts at 7 and ends at 8:30 or something like that, in the evening. So finding the time has not been the problem, and I'm very fortunate with that. Emotionally, it has been a roller coaster, and the
Okay.
reason why is from the time I remember, I distinctly remember in middle school, my 6th grade choir teacher, of all things, showed us a video clip of the Beatles on Sullivan. And my brain broke in that moment. And I watched Ringo Starr up there. And I had wanted to be a lawyer before that or something like that. And from that moment on, and I'd already been drumming for a couple of years, but it never as a profession, never thought of that as a possibility. And just like all the kids who actually watched it back in February of 64, I was like, oh, that's what I'm going to do. And from that point until some point in Rossifari, it was the only thing I ever wanted to do. And I've had other passions and other things that I care about, hobbies and stuff. And I like putting time into things that matter. I've often volunteered for different causes or raised money for different causes before I found the conservation side of things. But now it's kind of all I care about, is the animal stuff and conservation and helping to spread the word. I love playing the drums. I love sitting on stage and delighting an audience. And I think that especially in the times we're in now, that's actually an important thing to be able to do.
Right.
But I will tell you, man, I don't care about it like I used to. It's my day job. It's a cool day job, but it's been really weird. It's been a major identity shift for me because, I found something that I'm way more passionate about. And I will tell you, I was playing recently at the Walnut Street Theater, which is one of the most famous theaters in the country. And I was in the middle of a drum solo at this theater, a full-on drum solo. 1,500 people staring at me, everyone else on stage not playing. And I mean, that's my job. That's not uncomfortable for me, right?
Right.
And all I was doing was thinking about a meeting I had coming up for Safe Red Panda in the middle of the solo. And even that, my brain was like, John, pay attention, man. It's an improvised drum solo. And I'm sitting there thinking about red pandas. And I'm like, dang it, John. And I had to focus back in and get, and that would have never happened before.
Right.
I made every choice in my life built around drumming and my career and what I thought would be best for that. And to have that passion not disappear, but fade in comparison to how important the conservation stuff is to me has been really cool and really good, but really scary. And really, I look at my wife and I say, what do I want to be when I grow up? And I'm grown up, y'all. There's no, oh man. But
the saying I adhere to is if we just get older, we don't ever grow up.
That's the truth. That's the truth.
So have you sat with that to then explore why do you think that's happened? Like if I asked you, why do you think that shift has happened, where you can be sitting there at a very famous theater doing an improvised drum solo, which has been who you are at your core for so long, childhood dream, really, like if childhood you could see you on that stage in that moment where everybody else is silent, you've got the entire audience wrapped up. Why do you think your heart center has shifted, or maybe not even shifted? Maybe it should be looked at as growth. I don't know. Share with me.
Yeah.
Why is it then that your mind is wandering to red pandas at that moment? Do you know why that's happened, or what's caused that flow?
I think it's because I think music matters. I think entertaining I truly do believe all of that. I've said that my whole life. Were I ever to walk away from it, which I can't even imagine even now, I would support the heck out of everybody who does it still. And like I said, I can't imagine doing that now. But with that said, when I think of a red panda or a tree kangaroo or a binturong or a sea turtle, having no one advocating for them, but let's be honest, we have a whole industry but you know what I mean. Like,
I do, yeah.
They can't advocate for themselves.
Correct.
And even in the conservation world, the dirty little secret, and it's funny because I was just talking, I was visiting a good friend at Cleveland Metro Park Zoo yesterday, Dr. Diana Kester, and she does a lot with tree kangaroos. And we were talking about how, people and egos still get in the way in conservation. And I've had stories on my podcast talk about that. And I've had things that shocked me, and depressed me and that kind of thing. And so even though there are people doing the thing, the animals can't do it for themselves.
Right.
And I also feel like conservation as an umbrella thing. Yes, I focus on a couple of species because if we all go after everything, you're never going to get everything done.
Right.
At some point you have to say no, find your niche and stick to it. But I feel like every impact that I have with animals is somehow bigger and matters to the world more
Mhm.
and matters to creatures that can't do anything for themselves. Like right now, as we're recording, I am doing a fundraiser for the Tree Kangaroo Conservation Project and program. I always say project. I don't know why. Anyway, TKCP. And it's just a small thing I'm doing on my socials. It's kind of a raffle to win a very unique plush that I found and stuff. And but it's brought in over $500 for tree kangaroo conservation, and that's not a huge amount of money or anything. But it's $500 that will go to Papua New Guinea,
Right.
where that is a ton of money, and
Yeah.
will have a major impact there. And that's really, really special. And to think that that impact could save one tree kangaroo, just one. That's incredible. That's a different kind of thing. And part of what I think it is too is that I love the fact that you never fully know the impact that you're having in this world. I've had people come up to me years after the fact and tell me that because they listened to the podcast, they joined the zoo world, or a person who reached out and said, yeah, we got these checks, during like a little after the main COVID thing, these economic relief checks, whatever.
Right,
Like,
right.
I didn't need it, so I donated the entire thing to one of the zoos that you featured.
Nice.
And it's like, I didn't know that when it was happening. I didn't know, and there are plenty of weeks where I'm sure none of that happens too. But I love not knowing the impact that I'm having. Whereas, like, I feel like as a musician, I know what impact I'm having. I can see the people. I can
It's
see
real
their spirits
time.
lift. It's cool to see.
Yeah.
It's nice. But, like, it doesn't have a lasting impact. Those people are going to go back out into the world feeling a little bit happier and maybe do something nice for some. I don't know. But with conservation, you never fully realize the impact you're having. And I think that's a really beautiful thing.
I love that. What is there any particular moment or experience that you think has drawn you to the species that you are most excited about? The tree kangaroo, the red panda, the sea turtle obviously goes back to your roots for the aquarium.
Yes.
But I mean, having 30 plus years in animal care and conservation education, binturongs, red pandas, and tree kangaroos are clearly the lesser known in the general public's eyes. In the zoo world itself, we all know these species well, but I can say in the general public's eye, these are not species that you can drop their name and people are like, oh yeah, I know exactly what that is. So was there a particular instant, or what is it that drew you to these particular species?
So there's a story for two of them, and then the one that doesn't have a story is binturong. I just remember seeing a binturong for the first time, or registering that I was seeing one for the first time, and my heart grew 3 sizes, and I was like, oh, I love you, right? And like, I
totally
still
get
do.
it.
I don't know why. When people ask me to explain why I like them, I'm like, they're really cool.
I don't see how
facts.
you couldn't fall in love with them. I
Yeah,
mean, I do recognize my personal passion for them is because of the individual I first worked with, the very first binturong I ever worked with. He stole my heart, wrapped it up, done and done. So now every binturong I see, I'm just like, I melt into a puddle, even if it's on my phone screen. So I totally get that, but I think I might be somewhat biased. But I get it. I understand that happening to you. But tell me more about the tree kangaroos and red pandas.
Yeah, so red panda. So I went through a divorce. I moved to Philadelphia. I didn't know anybody. It was a very tricky time in my life, and I got a membership to the Philadelphia Zoo. And I went. It was a time when I wasn't gigging like a lot. Like I had some downtime after my move, and so I would go to the Philly Zoo 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times a week sometimes. And I did have Zoe at the time. She was not my wife yet, but she was there. But she was in vet school, and so she'd be gone for hours every day, and so I would go to the zoo every day and just walk around and experience things and be outside in nature. And I remember I had seen red pandas before, and they were cute and they were cool. And I was at the time, the way the habitats were set up, I actually walked past the first habitat. I saw them. I was like, oh, hello, you two cute little red pandas. And then I hit the second habitat, and there was an old girl there. Her name was Maylin, and she lived there. She was in her late teens at the time, probably like 16, 17. It was shortly before she passed, actually. But she just looked at me and she was just crunching on some bamboo. And I don't know why, but when she looked at me, I felt like she was looking into my soul. And I never felt that way about any of these animals before. It was always, I mean, you unless you are working with them or spending time with them, you have a parasocial relationship with an animal at a zoo. That's fine. And this was that too. I fully acknowledge that logically, but it didn't feel like it. It felt like she was looking at me and she was searching into my soul. So I started talking to her. And I would go to the Philly Zoo and I would talk to her all the time, like every day. And I just fell in love. And then I started to notice the other ones over there. You know, Kumbi was the male who's still there and I've actually gotten to meet now, which is incredible. And I would go and I would talk to these guys and I would hang out. And I don't know, again, I don't really know what it was in that moment, but it was Mei Lin that I needed in that moment. And granted, I was spending a lot of time there, so statistically this kind of makes sense, but things started happening while I was there. I would get offers for gigs. I got an offer for a huge tour. I got an offer for all these things that were starting to show me that like life was getting back on track and that we were going to be okay, you know? And I started calling it Red Panda Magic. And I am not woo-woo. It was just me being silly. But like, I swear, I'd be waiting for an email for like 4 hours and it wouldn't come. And I'd be like, all right, screw it, I'm going to the zoo. And I'd be walking around the zoo for like an hour and nothing would come. And then I would go to the red panda habitat and bling, there was the email. And it was what I wanted, you know?
Nice.
And it was really funny. And then I found out, like, I started reading the signs and hey, it turns out they're endangered. And then I learned about Red Panda Network and like, you know, all of those things came from that. And then with tree kangaroos, it's the dumbest story ever. And that makes me so happy because like,
I was about to say, sometimes the dumbest stories are the best.
I know. And I love it because the red panda thing was like so personal and so emotional and like, it's what I needed at that time, Rick. Right. And then I go to, I'm online one day and the San Diego Zoo, or the safari park was getting the Australia area. Right.
Yeah. I'm familiar.
And, you might be. Yeah. And I saw that y'all did an online quiz and I hate them. But it was the San Diego Zoo Safari Park. Of course I was going to do one. Of course I was going to do my part to contribute, right? As though that actually matters at all. But it was, what Australia animal are you? And I was like, this is cool. I'm going to be a platypus because y'all are getting platypuses and that's cool. And it came up as a Matschie's tree kangaroo. And I remember I was so confused by being an animal that I had never heard of and kind of annoyed that I took a screenshot of my result because I was like, I need to look into what these little goobers are because it was very cute. I could tell that. And I'm so glad I took that screenshot because I still have that screenshot.
Nice.
Which is a like nice personal memory to me of like this dumb thing, talking about how you never know what impact you're going to have when you do stuff in this world, right? The person or people who designed that quiz, it was probably a goofy thing. It had to go through like 6 layers of approval. And I'm sure at least one person was like, why are we doing that? All right, whatever, go ahead, you know, because that happens all the time, right? And but it got out there. And I found out I was a Matschie's tree kangaroo. And by the way, having now spent a lot of time with Matschie's tree kangaroos, I'm in no way a Matschie's tree kangaroo. That was a terrible job. But it made me look into them and learn about them. And I fell in love. And then I was doing a gig in New Mexico. And the band that I was playing with was based out of L.A. And so they flew us into L.A., we drove to New Mexico, then we drove back. And we drove back way earlier than expected. So I got to Los Angeles at like some ungodly early hour after like a multi-hour car ride.
Sure.
And I was there and my flight wasn't until the next day. And I was like, wait, that new Australia section opened. I can go meet myself. And I rented a car and I drove to Escondido and I really was going to see the platypus. I mean, in all honesty, that's really cool. And I did that. And then I walked up and I saw a tree kangaroo. And because I felt like, oh, we're like, you know, the internet tells me that we're friends, we're related,
spirits, right?
And so I just sat there and I was watching and I started taking photos and I just fell in love and it caused me to do research and learn about them. And, you know, now I'm on Safe Tree Kangaroo. So like, it's such a dumb start to the story because it was a stupid online quiz. And I even love that at the time I was naive enough to be like, the San Diego Zoo Safari Park needs my click. I'm helping them, you know, that's the dumbest thought ever. but it worked.
It isn't. I mean, right? I mean, and that's when we pull back and look at the work we do, whether it's your podcast, my podcast, social media, whether it's a silly online quiz from a zoo, and you even saying, look, this is a dumb reason why I like these guys. But the reality is you go back to that person who had that idea, like, oh, we should do this online quiz to help promote it. And then you draw that thread all the way through from that one person in the office who had that idea for them to do this to now what you're doing, raising that $500 or more possibly. There's nothing, and that's the other side of it too, right? So in my world, everyone wants, we need to be able to measure our impact. And I get that from an academic side of things, from people doing these studies, trying to justify the work of zoos and wildlife education. It's like, how can we measure the impact? Or are we just pretending there's something there so we can do this? But your story is a great example, albeit academically it'd be considered anecdotal.
Right.
But to what you said earlier too, we don't always know the ripple effect that we have. And previous interviews I've discussed that as the invisible ripple. We don't see necessarily what we do. Sometimes we do, like if you throw that rock into the pond, you get a bounce back off a log and the ripple comes back to you a little bit. Sometimes we get a glimpse of that from somebody coming to us telling you, hey, it was that zoo you featured. I gave them my bonus checks to because I didn't need the money. That story about the tree kangaroo and also the red panda, I think show not only the value in zoos showcasing these animals, sharing what's going on with them, getting people interested, whatever means necessary, a silly online quiz or a sign that only 3 people will ever read, that still has put an impact on you to the point now, again, we go back to what you said earlier. You're sitting there doing a drum solo in the best theater ever with all these people paying attention to you, and your brain's like, red pandas, red pandas, red pandas. So, I mean, I love that story, man. I don't think it's dumb at all. I think that's so cool. And I mean, for me personally, as you're describing the online quiz and describing then going to see the habitats, I'm like, I remember where I was at that time working for that organization. So that was kind of cool too. Well, that's so cool. And that's what I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, because I just can't say it enough, it feels like, for people to realize that you can have a different career path. You can be doing whatever. And it's just sort of that, to me, what your story, you sharing your story with me and the audience here is, it shows that as we lean into our passions and we acknowledge our passions, whether it's for a silly reason or for a personal reason, whether it is woo-woo or not woo-woo, or just the way the world works out that you got emails right there at the Red Panda Habitat every time, whatever it may be, I think it's when we pay attention to those things and we lean into it, that's when we start to feel like we're making a difference, and we have that connection. Part of the thing I rolled through in my brain coming up with how I want to sort of drive this podcast and the stories we share here is, what is that connection that we have? What is that connection to animals and to nature? And how do we explore that more? How do we become a little more curious about that? So I appreciate you being willing to share those stories, whether you feel they're silly or not, or whatever it may be. I do want to ask, so as we're recording this, it is mid-February. This should come out the end of March. You had mentioned the fundraiser you're doing now. Do you have anything else coming up in the future, or do these things kind of come up spontaneously as far as how you see yourself supporting these different species?
Sure. So I am a member of the executive committee of Safe Red Panda.
And what is that exactly for those who don't know?
Yeah, great question. So the AZA has a series of conservation programs called the SAFE program, Saving Animals from Extinction. And you basically pick a species and you design a conservation program around it. And each one, there are some parameters you have to follow, but each one is its own unique program. And so for Safe Red Panda, we are currently partnering with Red Panda Network on some vaccination campaigns. And I can tell you this now. You're the first person I can tell this to, because when it's out, this will be public.
Breaking news.
Yes, this is really exciting. So we are working on canopy connector bridges in Nepal.
Oh.
And so the idea is that we've seen some studies that show basically that red pandas won't cross roads, even if their roads, what happens a lot in Nepal is an area gets logged. and they build these small roads to do the logging, and then they leave. And the roads are basically abandoned. They're not like, a red panda's not going to get hit by a car. But if a red panda sees that road, it's like, nope, I am not crossing. So the habitat fragmentation there is even worse than it is in a lot of places, because the pandas are like, absolutely not. And so we came up with the idea of canopy bridges through the trees so that they will hopefully cross over, kind of like some of the wildlife crossings that you see over highways and stuff like that, you know. And so we have designed a few, and we are currently working on getting them. We're going to test them in zoos and see what works and what doesn't work and refine our designs. And then we're going to start to put them up in Nepal and see if we can't reconnect some habitat over there. Yeah, and I'm really excited about that program. It's one of the first things we came up with. I've been sitting on this for like a year and a half, and I just want to scream it from the mountaintops.
That is so cool. That is so cool.
That's going to be the next big focus.
Yeah, that's huge. So, I mean, my brain, wow. Because so when, years and years and years ago, when we really started talking about habitat fragmentation for other species, whether it was the giant panda or even elephants, as populations grow, highways get put in, that fragmentation creates these population islands. And I'm saying this more for people listening who may not know.
Right.
Because I know you know. So the idea then is you get these, either you lose genetic diversity because there's no, or you lose population altogether because the males can't find females, vice versa, or the babies grow up and they can't leave their natal habitat and create their own spaces. Goodness, the idea that this can be done for red pandas through these canopy bridges, how awesome is that? If people wanted to find out more about this, since you can talk about it when this officially comes out, should there be a link I can put in the show notes or find you somewhere, or what's the best way to find out more about this?
Yeah, so follow me at Rossifari or at Rossifari Pod on TikTok. Also, Safe Red Panda has our own Instagram and Facebook pages and stuff. It's just at Safe Red Panda.
Okay.
It's we're gonna have a lot of content coming out. We're gonna be sharing about this. We actually already are selling some merch, and that money will be going to help build these and implement them in Nepal. And also, if you like fun little things, the Follow company, which is the company that does the bracelets and plushes, where you can track animals, we partnered with them last year. And you can now track red pandas and get your bracelet, and plushes will be coming out this year, I believe. And those sales, 10% of each sale goes directly to Safe Red Panda, and then 10% goes to the overall SAFE program at the AZA, which then distributes grants to the various programs to work on things. So it's a great way to have some fun, track red pandas, wear something cool, and at the same time, be giving to that conservation work.
Yeah. And so this reminds me a bit, looking back, the initial concept. So, you're saying obviously we've got to create these bridges to go in the canopies, then test them out in zoos. It reminds me back in the African penguins, where there were several different prototypes of nest boxes, and they deployed them amongst zoos that had African penguins. Let the penguins kind of show them, is this going to work? Is this a good idea? And then eventually they got deployed onto the beaches in South Africa to help with the loss of the nesting habitat that they were experiencing. So, and that was quite a timeline, of course, a timeline of testing and reconfiguring and narrowing down to what's going to be best, and then deploying them and getting them out there through the proper networks. Is there any sort of concept of timeline as to when these first will be deployed in zoos to test out versus when we might see them actually going up in the wild? Or is it sort of we're taking it step by step?
We are taking it step by step. We have the initial designs, and we have zoos on board to build them and test them. So that's coming soon. Hopefully they will start to go up, maybe by the time this is out or shortly thereafter, at least the first ones. But we genuinely have no idea how the pandas are going to react. There are a few facilities that have, like the Philadelphia Zoo has their Zoo 360, and their red panda can go between habitats, and Greensboro Science Center has something similar, but they're not the kind of bridges we could have in the wild. They're very man-made looking.
Sure.
So we know that the concept is a good one. We know that pandas are open to the idea. But so we'll have to see what these new ones, what they teach us. And even already, like I was at the Philadelphia Zoo a couple months ago, just hanging out with the pandas and with their keeper Abby, who I've become really good friends with. And I mentioned this off the record to her, and she was like, "Oh, have you guys thought about this?" And specifically, she was saying that their bridge is basically the width of a panda, give or take, and that sometimes one of the pandas wants to cross and another one's sleeping on there, and it leads to like minor conflict. But that if it was wide enough, the pandas, just knowing their behavior in their habitat, would walk around it. So she was like, maybe they should be wider than you're thinking. And I was like, oh, we definitely didn't talk about that in any of the meetings I was in. So, it's cool to be able to bring that expertise. And that's one thing that SAFE programs do. They bring the expertise of people in the zoological field, whether it's actually working in zoos, somebody like me. I even know people from like the SSA group that run a lot of the gift shops and ticketing and stuff for a lot of different zoos are involved in these programs, but they bring this expertise from all of these ex situ situations and then try to use that to plop it into in situ conservation, which is amazing.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Man, what a great idea. I love that. I'm so excited to hear about that and can't wait to see how it goes. That, again, because it's those little things that sometimes, we're going to go in and log an area, there's a road, it's abandoned, the animals will be fine. But it's funny, as soon as you mentioned that the red pandas wouldn't cross that open space, even though there's no traffic, I immediately jumped back in my memory. I took care of a couple red pandas in the old children's zoo up the San Diego Zoo. This is early 2000s when I first started there. And it was a pretty large habitat, very, very vertical too, though. We had a pond, we had plenty of open space. There was ivy, there's bamboo, there's trees, plenty of climbing structures. And I remember always, and it seemed no matter what, when they were on the ground, they preferred to stay in the covered areas where the ferns were and the plants were growing. There were times where they would have to cross open space because we had to open just so I could walk through there and clean. And inevitably, they'd always run through that part, that open space they would run through. And I never even thought like, oh, it's just like, they want to hurry up and get to wherever they're going. But now that you mention that, I'm like, wow, I wonder if that's a species. Like, I only worked with the couple that were there. I wonder if it's across the entire species. That open space is just not safe, and so they prefer not to even pretend that's an option. That's so amazing.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And it's also interesting because, like, there is, obviously, we learn a lot about animals being in zoos, and obviously I'm a big proponent of zoos, but also like the different way that animals get handled, even from zoo to zoo, can change things. Like, I know from, Nikki Boyd is the program leader of Safe Red Panda and the one who got me involved, and she is the curator at the San Diego Zoo and loves red pandas. And I know that her approach is very hands-off. She loves to say, we want them to be pandas, and I know that at other really great accredited zoos, they're very hands-on with their pandas, and they do meet and greets every day, and they, and so it's funny because you're right. The pandas at San Diego are going to want to avoid those open spaces. Meanwhile, the pandas at Cincy or Columbus are going to wander through them calmly and confidently. And so I always think it's interesting, like, what you can learn about wild animals being in human care, but then also where sometimes you kind of have to step back and look at, like, oh, what is a natural behavior and what is more of a zoo-born behavior?
Right. Oh, absolutely. You see, that's one thing too, is like, when I was in the zoo world and we had animals for educational programs, I would always see, even though you see us handling them and working with them, this is not a normal behavior. This is not something you would normally see. If you ever see one in the wild, give them their space. This animal is conditioned to work with us, and we know its body language to know when it's appropriate to work with it. And you give the whole spiel, but you're absolutely right. What is that normal response or behavior you see when you're trying to do conservation in the wild versus the way the animal expresses itself and its comfort level in the zoo environment around people it's known its entire life because it was born there, So yeah, it is interesting. It is so interesting. That is so cool. I really appreciate you sharing all that here on the podcast. I'm excited for that program.
Me too. I'm excited to have finally shared about it. I'm sure you can tell. I'm like exploding. We came up with this idea as one of the first things we did when we started talking about Safe Red Panda. But you have to put together a whole program guide and get it approved and do all these things.
Oh, yeah.
And we did all of that, and being involved in that was really an honor, but also a pain in the butt. I'll tell you what, just being real. And but it was amazing to be a part of. But that whole time, this was just like simmering on the back burner. And it's like, yeah, we're going to do this, but now we have to figure out a budget for our first 3 fiscal years. And I'm like, let's just make the canopy connectors.
Yeah.
So to be able to finally be at this phase is incredible.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Wow, that is really, my head is just like, I'm going a million different directions now. I cannot wait. So anybody listening, please check out the links down below in the show notes, whether you're seeing this on YouTube or anywhere you're listening to your podcast. I'll make sure those links are in there. But I am not close to wrapping up even. I want to pick your brain now about your podcast. You have been doing this for 6 years, give or take. You have well over 600 episodes at the time that we're recording this. You have talked to so many interesting people and obviously just know the zoo world inside and out across the globe. Maybe you can't narrow it down, but could you share with us probably one of your more interesting, like by interesting, I mean this, an interview you did that you were like, whoa, I had no idea, or some fun fact that just kind of rocked your world with all you've done so far with all these interviews? There's got to be something. So I'm just curious if there was one particular one or one you could pick out of the many you've done.
There is one particular one, but it's not fun. Is that okay? Can I be real for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
no, that's what this is about.
Okay, just making sure, because it's the least fun thing I've ever learned. It's something that I talked about earlier, talking about egos, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So, Panamanian golden frogs are not doing great. And there's a bunch of work being done in zoos and in Panama to save them. And early on, I did an interview with the team trying to save them in Panama. And at the time, it was a group of 3 leaders that were doing this thing. And they had a breeding center and they had all this stuff set up and they were, doing all the things, doing great work. And then there was an argument over how to proceed on certain things. And so one of the partners left and took a lot of the funding and the buildings and half of the frog population with them. Now, this is a population that we need to breed for genetic diversity to save a species. And he took his toys and went home. And his toys can save that species, right?
Yeah.
And so when I was interviewing the people involved with this, with Project Golden Frog, they were in a cheap hotel in Panama. They had 1 room for themselves, 1 room for their staff, and 1 room for their entire breeding population of frogs.
Wow.
And they set it up to breed in there. And so because of human ego, the health of this species was temporarily based in a cheap hotel. And that has stayed with me more, and that was early, and that has stayed with me more than anything else. And anytime I ever see egos start to creep into anything, including myself, because I can have one, we all can, we all do. I try to think of that moment and think, wow, that's the worst thing I've heard on my podcast. But it stuck with me. And to be completely fair, I only heard one side of the argument. Like I'm going to say all of the standard caveats,
Right.
But with that said, whatever happened, the population was ripped in half, and the breeding population trying to save the species was stuck in a cheap hotel room. And as somebody who tours, I can tell you, I've been in my fair share of cheap hotel rooms. It sucks.
It's not somewhere you want to save a population of frogs.
Great. No, it's not somewhere where you want to sleep. So, it's not ideal. And I think about that all the time because... And the cool thing is they're still doing the work. They have recovered. They are doing the thing, right?
Right.
But ego could have destroyed that population. And that sticks with me more than anything else that I've learned in this podcast.
So on the heels of that, then, is there a lesson that we, as those who care about, talk about, share stories with, engage with, network with, is there sort of this lesson in the background of how can we do better as humans when it comes to work like that?
I think we need to do better as humans in general. But that's a whole other podcast.
We can do another episode.
But no, I think we need to always keep the animals at the front. Because, and one of the things I find so interesting is part of what I do is I have a large online presence, and I am happy to engage with the anti-zoo crowd as long as they are engaging in good faith, which means rarely,
Sure.
but it does happen sometimes. I've had some great conversations. I think I've changed some opinions. I've also not, but had solid conversations in the process. And the thing that I always remember from that is that it all comes from the same place. It all comes from a love of animals and a passion for animals, which is hard because when you think about most of the things that we debate and all of the political things and all of the stuff, right? We're coming from the opposite side most of the time. And when it comes to animals, we're coming from the same side, which is a different kind of argument. But I think, if we can remember where we're coming from, and remember that, like, if you don't love zoos, then you don't have to say that zookeepers are evil people, because they're not. I can very much say that they're not. But they're people who love animals. So approach me if you want to talk, from an anti-zoo standpoint, as a person who loves animals, and that you understand that, and put in 30 seconds and realize that I love, red pandas, and come to me and say, this is why red pandas shouldn't be in zoos. Now, I'm not going to agree with you. And I have evidence and studies and all kinds of things that we can talk about. But that is so much better than saying, hey, insert swear word here, F you for claiming that you love these animals, but you really hate them because you want them in jail, and rah, 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 Right. And so I really think if we all just come at it from the perspective of we all love animals, whether we are two conservationists who completely disagree on how to do things, or whether we are a passionate zoo defender and a passionate anti-zoo person, if we start off remembering it's about the animals, then you can definitely swallow some of that ego. That I hope.
Yeah.
I would hope. But clearly sometimes not.
Well, sure, because the ego is very strong in the human condition in general, I think, and it's part of our conditioning, our survival is that we have to be certain of ourselves, and sometimes that gets carried too far, etc. But I do want to reflect back on what you just said, understanding that the debate is instead of coming from opposite sides, like sometimes politics, most of the time politics, we're coming from the same direction of caring about the animal. And that's one thing that when I was an instructor at Moore Park College, I always try to reinforce in the students that when someone challenges you about animal training, about animal care, about conservation in zoos, or that animal doesn't look happy, or why is it locked up, or any of that, the first thing out of your mouth should always be, I'm glad to hear you say that, because that tells me you care about animals and I care about them too. So let's have a discussion about that. And what that does for yourself, saying that, it helps remember, just exactly like you said, we're coming from the same side. We both care. And it also shares with them, I'm not going to fight you. Let's find this middle ground and go from there and have this discussion. And to your point, not everybody on the other end of that is going to, are willing to put down their ego and have that discussion. But there are those that will. And even if you still agree to disagree, there might be more common ground found in than not, versus just disregarding them with a curse word.
Yeah. One thing that I've loved is in the conversations where I know I haven't, gotten through completely. No, they're not going to their local zoo after we've talked, but we've had a nice chat. I usually have managed to educate them about an animal that they love a little bit, even if it's just something dumb, even if it's just about how elephant trunks work a little bit, or that tree kangaroos don't have prehensile tails, because a lot of people see those long tails and think they're prehensile, whatever. Yeah. Just dropping in some of those facts just in the conversation, and they're like, well, blah, 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 and they don't even get to use their prehensile tail. And I'm like, oh, actually, I hear what you're saying, but also not a prehensile tail, but also let's get back to what you're saying. And it's like, cool, I succeeded as a conservation educator, even if ultimately, I didn't have the mind-changing impact. Plus, again, going back to never knowing what impact you have, that conversation might not have worked, but then they have two more, and, so they're talking to you, or they're talking to Jungle Jordan or somebody, and that's the person who finally gets the click, but I was a part of that. You were a part, whatever. Yeah. And I think that's really cool, too.
Right, because that positive conversation, they may walk away not having their mind completely changed or being able to reflect beyond their initial thought, but it could be the planting of that seed. Exactly. It could be the start of that ripple, and that another conversation or another thing all of a sudden, or they could be thinking about the conversation later and go, well, I got to look into that. You never know. So it's so awesome. I love that perspective. You did mention just now, which is a great segue how I want to wrap this up. You did mention that through these conversations with people who may or may not agree with zoos, that you can also use that opportunity to educate a little bit. When it comes to red pandas or tree kangaroos, give me your favorite fact to drop on people that always gets that sort of like, oh, I didn't know that about either one or both of those species.
Sure. Well, the first thing I'll say is tree kangaroos exist. And that's a thing that a lot of people did not know. You talking about the unintended consequences thing of that online quiz. I put out a video of a tree kangaroo named Morobi. He has unfortunately recently passed away. But he was 19 years old, had a great life, lots of offspring.
That's a solid life for a tree kangaroo.
Yeah, real good. And he has a lot of tree kangaroos get this thing where they get basically a type of arthritis, I think, in their hands, and it will freeze one of their fingers a little bit. And they can still do all the other things and everything, but sometimes it's their middle finger. And so it leads to them giving you the finger, just constantly, especially when they're eating, because they'll grip with the other ones.
Right.
And, there it is, right? And so I put out this video of him eating, and it's literally nothing. There's no education. There's nothing. They make really great crunching noises. And I didn't even realize, because I knew Morobi, I didn't even think about the finger thing. It went super viral. Like 10 million people watched this video because it was a tree kangaroo giving them the finger. And the number one comment by far was, what is this animal? I've never heard about it. So I'm in there educating people that these animals exist to the tune of millions of people learning about this species because 6 years ago, somebody decided to put out a quiz online,
Again, that ripple effect. That's
so
cool.
crazy, right?
I love it.
So amazing. So yeah, I love teaching that they exist. It's funny to say that, but my actual favorite fact about tree kangaroos is the fact that they, especially if you see them wandering through trees when they're not in danger, they look totally derpy. Like they do not look like they should be in trees.
Right.
But they're actually really good at moving when they have to, and they can jump a full 60 feet down to the ground without taking any damage. 60 feet. That is a huge drop for a tiny little animal. And that one always blows my mind with them. And then my new recent favorite red panda fact is that their masks are and their markings are so bright, they're white, that it's not bioluminescence or anything like that. I've seen a lot of places online claiming that it is, and it's not that. But they are so bright that even in the darkest dark in Nepal and China and Bhutan, their youth can see it. The cubs can see it and will follow them and stay with them in the dark. And I think that's really special and really cute. And that's like a recently discovered thing, which I always find interesting as well. And then I have one other thing that I have to ask you before we go.
Please do.
So you asked me for some facts. Now we need to talk about binturongs first.
And ladies and gentlemen, this podcast episode will be 2 hours long.
Well, there's a question that I have to ask you, and I love asking people this.
Yes.
Because the most famous fact about binturongs is that they smell like buttered popcorn. And I call foul on that. That's a party foul. To me, they do not smell like popcorn. I have had binturongs climbing all over me. I have had a ton of amazing experiences with binturongs. And I have only once smelled what I thought was butter popcorn. The rest of the time, to me, they smell like corn chips, stale corn chips. I'm going to be real specific. Okay, so this is what I wanted to know.
Corn chips.
Yes. Okay, perfect. I wanted to know your opinion on that because it's too late to change the narrative. I realize that they are our popcorn buddies. But to me, I've only ever smelled that once. And the rest of the time, it has been warm, stale corn chips.
So my experience has been this. The very first one I worked with was a male. And when you would walk by his habitat on the guest path, every now and then you would get this whiff that would be like reminiscent of popcorn. And yet when I would work with him, if he would get on me or his smell would be on me afterwards, it was very much more that sharper, stale corn chip smell that you mentioned, or corn nuts is another one. That's an old snack from a long time ago. Probably people don't have those anymore. Fritos is another term that people might recognize as a brand that has that same odor. So I don't know if it has to do with the concentration, that when you are directly with them, touching them, on them, working with them, cleaning their habitat, or they've been on you or near you in very close proximity, it's definitely more of that corn chip, corn nut, warm, musky type smell, versus at a distance wafting through the air, dissipating a little bit. Maybe it becomes more popcorny on the nose. And then I worked with a younger male, and as he was maturing, it was definitely much more of a popcorn type smell. But as he got older, it definitely went further into that corn chip, stale, warm corn chip smell.
So maybe they just get stale as they grow up.
Right. As they get old, they get stale. I don't know. That's funny. But yeah, the buttered popcorn, theme seems to have been the one that is stuck overall. And again, I do wonder if that might be because from the public side, when you're a little more of a distance, that's what your brain is trying to pick up on, and the influence too. So here's the other part of it too. You're at the zoo, you're with kids, you've had popcorn, you're eating popcorn. There's a popcorn stand down the way. Your brain is trying to interpret, what am I smelling? And so I know this from studying human behavior and psychology. Our brain tries to make sense of our environment, what we're seeing, what we're hearing, what we're smelling. And so that's why we sometimes are mistaken about what we hear, see, or smell, is because our brain is trying to help us make sense of the unknown. So I wonder too if then, as people are walking through the zoo, I smell popcorn, because that's what they're associating, even on a subconscious level.
Right.
So maybe that might be how it all stuck there. I don't know. But nonetheless, I will tell you this. To this day, if I smell that smell, my heart, like you said, it just like swells 3 times right away. I just associate that so much with those crazy bear cats, those binturongs. I just love them so much. And it's just so funny how the brain does that, where it could be, nowhere near the zoo, nowhere near a binturong, and some waft to something that is similar. I'm like, oh, my babies.
Yep. I don't know why this has happened, but I have a Chihuahua. And I am a small dog person. We have 3 dogs, but the Chihuahua is mine. His name is Buzz. And he is a rescue. He's like a mutt Chihuahua, but I love him. But whenever he curls up, and it's only when he curls up in a tight ball, which they do a lot, and he simmers for a while. He sits there and he gets very warm, as they do. But if you pick him up, his chest smells exactly like a binturong. And I've never experienced that with another dog. I've had other Chihuahuas and stuff, and I don't know why, but I will pick him up and bury my nose in his chest. And he's like, "Dad, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "You smell like a binturong."
So the science behind that has to do with body temperature and bacteria. And the off-gassing of a bacteria hitting a certain temperature is what causes that smell. And so for the longest time, when I first started working, it was cited everywhere that this is a binturong musk gland, and this is how they naturally smell. And more recent study, I can't remember which college it was at. I have this information written down because I always reference it, but my brain's horrible. There is a chemical compound that is released when popcorn is heated to a certain temperature that gives it that smell. And it's I'll have to look it up. I'll put it in the show notes. Either way, the recent studies on the binturongs have found that it is the acids in the urine and the bacteria on the skin and fur combining, creating, instead of a heat temperature, creating a chemical release of the same smell, or the same atoms basically that is in popcorn when it releases. So it's very interesting that there are times where I have smelled it on dogs as well, but not as strong, not as powerful as the binturong.
No,
but there is a natural occurring smell that occurs when, I guess, a certain bacteria breaks down, or I don't remember the exact science. I have a post on my Instagram about it from eons ago when I first discovered this study, and I think I have a bookmark on my computer somewhere. But it's fascinating. It's fascinating stuff, and I'm addicted to the smell. It's bacteria or not, I still love it.
Yep, me too. Can I tell you one other funny binturong story? Since
please
I think you'll appreciate it. I know we're running over a little, but I just think you'll appreciate this story. So I get the opportunity to audition for a tour that was called the Ultimate Johnny Cash Tour. Okay. And I'm a big fan of Johnny Cash. That's right in my wheelhouse. And the idea was that it was the actual Cash family putting on this tour. And they got the audio and video of Johnny Cash performing on his television show. Mm-hmm. And with modern technology, we're able to isolate his guitar and vocals.
Wow.
And the idea was that you would tour with a live band and play with Johnny. And cool idea. Ended up not being something I really wanted to do when I found out all the details, but I was pretty stoked. And so I got invited to Nashville to audition for this. And I made it all the way through to the final round where I was going to go and play for Johnny Cash's son and some other people involved in that world, right? And I was like, this is amazing. This is really cool. And my buddy Steve was also a finalist for a different, for one of the guitar tracks. And so I wake up the morning of my final audition for this really big thing. At the time, I thought that I really wanted to do this. And I was a little nervous and stuff, so I went to the Nashville Zoo. Because of course I did.
Yeah.
And I reached out to the ambassador team and asked if I could come hang out for a little bit. And so I did. And Willow, the binturong,
love Willow. I met Willow too.
Love
yep.
Willow. Yep, she's the best. And Willow, as many binturongs do, but she seems really into it. She likes to style your hair. Mm-hmm. And she does so with some spit and snot and you know she gets in there. She gets in there. And so I'm there and I stay at the zoo until the last possible minute. And then I head off to the studio where I'm doing this audition and I walk in and I walk up to my buddy Steve and I'm like, hey, buddy, congrats on making to the finals. And he kind of gives me this weird look and he goes, hey, you too. Are you going to duck into the bathroom for a second? And I'm like, no, I don't have to pee. Why? And he's like, I thought you might want to, your hair's just a little, it's not terrible, but it's a little
something
off.
Going on.
And I was like, yeah. I was like, okay. So I duck into the bathroom and I'm like, yep. I smell like Fritos. Okay. I'm going to smell like a binturong. I'm not going out to my car and changing at this point. I'm like, okay. And I look at my hair. It's not terrible, but it's back then I had shorter hair, but there was definitely a part
slobber
that was
mark.
it was binturongy. And I thought to myself, what do I want to do? Look my best or walk into this audition knowing that my hair was styled by a binturong?
Right? Who else could say that?
Right. I know. This is an experience that no one else in the world will ever have. And so I left everything as it was, and I walked into that audition as happy as I could be, knowing that whatever happened, at least I was playing in front of Johnny Cash's son while having my hair styled by a binturong.
With binturong slobber in your hair.
Yep. No one else in the entire world will ever be able to tell that story. So
nice.
Yeah, I thought you'd appreciate
awesome.
that one.
I do. Absolutely. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've had a wide variety of different slobbers, smells, and stains on me while doing something by or near famous people. That's awesome. That is awesome. Jon, I have to wrap it up because we're hitting an hour, but I think we're probably going to have to maybe touch base with you near the end of the year, see how things are going with all the SAFE programs, catch up with what else you're doing. And before we do wrap up, so we kind of mentioned it in the middle of the episode, but roll down it again. How can people find you if they want to either get involved with what you're doing or catch your podcast or find you on social media?
Sure. So, Rossifari.com, at Rossifari. On TikTok, it's at RossiFariPod. And then, check out the SAFE programs. They're all over the place. The ones I'm involved with are at Safe Red Panda and at Tree Kangaroo Safe. But there are over 50 now, and they're awesome. And I partner with a lot of other conservation orgs. So if you just come check me out, you'll find other really great places to go and give your money and time and effort. So, come join the party.
Awesome. Love it. Love it. Jon, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate you spending time here with me today. And I'll probably be reaching out and having you on again.
Sounds good, buddy.
And of course, thank you, dear listeners. I appreciate you being here with me on this curious odyssey we call Animals, Nature, and You. And, if there's anything that we talked about, Jon and I talked about today, and you want to connect with them, all of his information will be down below. But I do want to make sure, for me, just reflecting back on his story, he was always about music, loved music, passionate about it, still is doing so much as a musician, a music director, an actor. But he always had this love for zoos and aquariums, and that thread has always been a part of his life. And now today he's having such an impact with his podcast, which I highly recommend you subscribe to or follow, but also too then with just the work he's doing on the SAFE program for red pandas and for tree kangaroos. It's really just goes to show you, like I mentioned in my interview with him, well, I was being interviewed by him, I should say, on his podcast, where the acronym for Animals, Nature, and You is ANY. Anyone can do conservation anytime, anywhere. You don't have to be a zoologist or a biologist. I mean, sure, you can be, by all means. I'm not going to stop you. But his story is a great example of what you can do with the talents you have, the ability you have, the curiosity and passion you have, and how that can make a difference. So what a great story. What a great story. I really just appreciate Jon so much. And like I said, all of his information will be in the show notes down below. You can find his social media, the websites we talked about, things like that. Of course, if you want to get a hold of me, my social media handles are down there as well, along with zoologybrick.com being my website. I do want to remind you, if you haven't already, please hit subscribe or follow on your podcast player or subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. We have 10-minute Tuesdays, every Tuesday, a shorter episode. I try to keep it at 10 minutes, but I have failed miserably the last couple times. Try to keep it at 10 minutes, so where we talk about something that might be regarding something that came up in the last episode, or something that's currently topical in the world about animals or nature or conservation, whatever it might be. And then, of course, too, every Thursday, we have interviews like we had today with Jon. And I've got about 2 months of interviews already scheduled out from here. And there's just so many great people. I can't wait for you to hear these conversations. I can't wait to have these conversations. Last but not least, if you want to engage with Animals, Nature, and You on Instagram, that is the only social media right now for this podcast. Animals, Nature, and You, that link is also down below. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you all so much for being a part of this Curious Odyssey. Have a good one, everybody.